I have a similar story about new guidance rule by the Trump administration for Section 401 of the Clean Water Act. And this section gives states and certain tribes the authority to review potential water impacts of projects like pipelines and export terminals and so on before the federal government can give permission to these projects. And so the background is executive order by President Trump from April, which wanted to promote and accelerate these kinds of projects. And EPA now, as a result of that, has proposed the new guiding rule. And the background is that several states have abused this kind of sort of permission veto right to block projects that didn't comply with their own political agenda, even when the water quality concerns were actually small. So, two examples here: New York State has blocked a natural gas pipeline coming in from Pennsylvania recently, and presidential candidate Jay Inslee, when he was governor of Washington State, used the Clean Water Act to block a proposed coal export terminal. And so the new guidance rule requires this permission process to issue a permission no later than 1 year after the application, which is sort of limiting the ability of state governments to stall projects they don't like. Think about Keystone XL, the now infamous pipeline project that is, I don't know if it's a record, but it's 11 years and counting. For this to be built from Canada to the refineries in Texas. And it also will limit the scope of the state review to actual water impacts and not, have some side issues in there. And so it's already visible that this will likely be contested in court because, of course, certain state governments like that of New York and California and elsewhere, they do want to be able to block projects they don't like pipelines and other energy infrastructure. And so it can be seen as a small victory within the framework, but this doesn't fix the general problem. One is the general anti-development, not in my backyard sentiment that is also present in large parts of the general population. And it's also not going to change the actual law. So you can expect the next administration, which is not as friendly to infrastructure project as the Trump administration, going two steps back after this one small step forward.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I think people are not worried by any single thing like this particular pipeline is being stopped. It just doesn't seem that big a deal. And that's a big problem if you want to stop this trend of infrastructure and energy projects being interfered with. And so if you think, well, what do people get upset about? Because one thing that we've cataloged on this podcast is they get upset about every blessed, particle of CO2 that goes into the air. And the the reason for that is that it's seen as part of a larger narrative, that anytime you have this narrative that something like CO2 is destroying the planet, then any contribution to that is seen as urgent and important. And I think that's why what you really need in order to shift the tide on something like this is that people start hearing constantly about a genuine crisis that we face, which is energy deprivation. That is, we're pushing ourselves towards a crisis because of the lack of reliable energy and infrastructure to reliably deliver reliable energy. And that has the potential. And in some places, I think we're frighteningly close to realizing that potential of being faced with blackouts and extreme high prices to avoid blackouts. And if people were genuinely frightened by that, then you could see a real movement here where each one of these cases would be seen as like, you are contributing to energy deprivation and that has to be stopped. And so, while I'm certainly happy to see these marginal improvements in the law, I definitely think that on their own they cannot accomplish a great deal.